am very happy to connect you two boys together. Rolf, get going. Who are you? What you've been doing, especially the last couple of years? Introduce yourself to everybody. Is this your first podcast too?
Yeah, with you guys, yeah.
Okay. All right, cool.
Even an old dude like me's done a few now.
Okay, that's good. Well, at least you're tech savvy.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, who am I? I'm an Australian with a Swedish passport, living in Sweden. Don't ask me why. I wonder myself sometimes. Track and field coach. Have been working as a track and field coach since mid-'80s, when my own decathlon career was derailed because of several rather large injuries. Have had the pleasure of working with a bunch of athletes that have qualified for the Olympic Games, European Championship, World Championships, etc. Yada, yada, yada. Worked with the Italian national football team in 2012. And have since 2016 been working in China, where I was first head coach of a Olympic sports center in Dalian, which is the peninsula just inside the Korean peninsula, where I was in charge of the multi-events and the women's vertical jumping, but also head coach for the entire facility. I was there 2016-17, and then Randy Huntington, who is probably the best jumps coach in the last 30, 40 years. He's head national coach for sprints and jumps. And he got me to come to Beijing. And in 2018 and 2019, I was assistant head national coach for the Chinese national sprint and jumps team. Where I've had the responsibility of not only coaching technique, but I was in charge of strength and conditioning for our athletes. So I've been working with a couple of athletes that one of them is the Asian record holder for 100 meters. He's also the 5th fastest ever over 60 meters indoors, Su Bing Chan. We've got 3 840 long jumpers, which in feet and inches is what, about close to 28 feet, I believe, which is, there's no other country in the world that's got 3 jumpers at 840 plus. And we've got a couple of other guys who are running sort of 10, 10, 10, 10, 15, 10, 20 for the 100, who are in the 4x100 team. So that's what I've been doing in 2018 and 19. And I was about to change jobs. Was offered a job, a very interesting job in winter sports leading up to the Winter Olympics in Beijing in 2022. Went home, had holidays, was about to pack my suitcase and the virus broke out and I'm still at home. So,
cool.
And well, I suppose I've got to sort of brag a bit. I'm also the inventor of the 1080 technology, which came online in 2010.
Yep. And that's actually where we met, in Stockholm all those years ago, or not that long ago. And then you helped us bring I think we were the first ones in Swiss at the time at elite training to have a system over there. And we managed to build a good old friendship and definitely learned quite a lot off you. And we've had some hilarious conversations over the years. One of the things I would love for you to go into is when you were over there in China, and I would always ask you, hey, how crazy is it over there? And, you know, we would go on and on and on. I'm sure Mike would love to hear some of the different details about Dalian and, you know, not just the infrastructure that's there, but also the sort of the restrictions in coaching and the philosophy and culture of life and development there. I mean, it's something that unless you've had any experience, you can't even imagine it is that way. So would you mind going, how was life there? How was it?
You know, China is a contradiction. And if you're a coach and you know what you're doing, and you're a good coach, it is probably the worst place in the world to go, because what happens is you get there and you just see the immense amount of talent, and you just go bananas. You virtually just go bloody bananas, and you just go, oh, crikey, what am I going to do? Oh, look at this, wow, wow, wow. And you start working, and then all of a sudden you're working away there, and in comes a little entourage of little guys all dressed in little suits, and it's some guys in the Chinese Olympic Committee or whatever it is, or the Provincial Olympic Committee, and all of a sudden they tell you what they want you to do. And you go like, what the, how do you mean? Well, this is China, and we have our Chinese culture. Yeah, but physiology is physiology, and these guys have got these strengths and these weaknesses. Now we've got to sort of address all parts of this, and if we do this, and if we have a plan and a process, and that's where it breaks down, because China don't have a process. In sports, I don't know about business. I mean, in business, it works on who you know. It's not a process. But in sports, there is no training process. None, zero. It can change. For example, one of the reasons why I was contemplating going to winter sports was that during the later parts, before we went to Switzerland for our summer training camp in summer of 19, which I enjoyed tremendously. It was probably the best couple of months in a long, long time. And I got a chance to hang out with you and Sam.
Yep.
But what happened prior to that was that we had a team of about 16 athletes, and virtually every week we came down for training on Monday morning. There'd be like, it was like the 10 bottles of beer on the wall. It was like 9, 8, 7. So we were about 16, 15, 14, 13, 12. And, we were wondering, where's Yi? Where's you? Where's Ying? Oh, they've been sent home. What do you mean they've been sent home? By who? And some guy in the federation has just decided, well, they just haven't been doing any results. Now, I'll give you a sort of like one instance, which was, this is crazy. We had a sprinter, a young guy. He'd run 10:20, and he was on course to run 10:15. So he's on the 4x1. He's running first leg. He's brilliant first leg. Can hold his own against 95% of all the world sprinters. Very good on the bend. He'd had hamstring injuries 2 years prior when he was on the relay team, and apparently they blew a gold medal at the Asian Championships because his hamstring went. But he managed to run the bend, but he lost like 4 or 5 meters when his hamstring pulled. And so he's back in the national team, and Randy says to me, Rolf, they all have English names, so we called him Ocean because his name reminds you of water, so we called him Ocean. He said, look, Ocean's yours. I want you to get him fit. We're going to go to Switzerland. We're going to run some meets. If he can run sub 10:20, he's back on the team, on the 4x100 team. At the moment, he's reserve, but he's still going to be reserve. Yeah. So off we went. So we've been working about 4 months. One day, the kid's down there, and he's got his suitcase packed. He's standing there. We're about to start training. He's got his suitcase there. So I asked Ocean, where are you going, Ocean? Oh, home. Oh, why? What's happened? Like somebody's sick. What's going on? Nope. I've kicked off the national team. Why? And the reason that we've been given was that somebody in the federation was nervous that he was going to rupture his hamstring again and was going to screw up the national team. So they sent him home, and Randy and I went through the roof, of course. The day before we were about to leave for Switzerland, we come down in the morning to do just a general sort of easy session before we're about to jump on the plane. And here's Ocean with his suitcase. Like, what are you doing here? Oh, coach, I'm back on the team. Okay. So he's been gone for like, what, 2 months, 3 months? So, I asked him, so what have you been doing? Oh, nothing. Really? You've been doing nothing and they've sent you back here? Yep. So Randy and I are sitting on the plane over to Zurich, and Randy says to me, look, we've got enough headaches. So Ocean's yours again. I don't care what you do. I mean, you can go so far out on a limb. I don't give a damn. Get this guy fit. Let's get him running fast again. And that's end of story. Just get him running fast again. So we did, and we went to Show de Camp on the French border, and the guy within 25 minutes runs 10:26 and 10:24 or something, and he's not 100% race fit yet. And what do the Chinese do? They send him home. Like, what?
That's one of the things. I mean, what always boggled my mind, Rolf, was when you would go on about how much, genetic potential they have. They've got so many people. Oh. They can chop and change through people like you can't believe.
Oh, mate, you see kids. You go to some of the provincial places that we've been to. Many of them, not all of them, that we compete, especially indoors. And you see young kids like 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and what they're doing and their movement patterns and so forth is just absolutely just ridiculous. I mean, you just go like, oh my God, but unfortunately the coaches in China, I would say that 90% of the coaches in China, they should be put on trial. I mean, they are so bad. It is a crime. It is so bad. It really is. They have got no idea. I was asked when I got to Guadango to educate the coaches, these coaches. I decided to sort of find out where is their knowledge level. So I sat there and I thought, so what do I start with? I've got no idea. So what do I do? So I thought, okay, let's go in and do a sort of a question and answers and just throw it around with periodization. Just see, where are they on periodization? That should sort of get a few bugs out of the carpet. Nada, zip, zilch. Chinese traditional training is volume, 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 volume. 2 weeks before major competitions, you drop all volume and then you run fast like shit, or you throw like shit, or you jump like shit, and then you rest for 3 days. That's it. And when you've heard stories like, and you think, that just can't be true. There's just no way. This can't work that way, but it does. This is exactly what because there's just so many talents. So if they lose 25 foot long jumpers who are 18 years old, it doesn't matter because there's another 50 out in the suburbs. Just go and pick them up.
How does their talent selection work there? You know what I mean? Like, how do they? Because it's such a huge country. It's got so many people. How do they, sort of pick these guys? And what's the process that they go from picking them as kids, to then the development?
Yeah, usually what happens is that out in the provinces, you have, like in Dalian, you have one major centre for summer sports. You'll have one, depending on where it is in China, you'll have one for winter sports, and then you'll have one for sports such as the ball sports, and you have one for racket sports. Sometimes they're a mix depending on how big the province is. I mean, to give you an idea, the Liaoning province where Dalian has 49 million people. So, I mean, so I've got the whole population of Germany sort of like that. That's where I'm supposed to find my talent. Like, okay, right. And then you'd sort of go, okay, now how many people do they have in Germany who are scouring the countryside and high schools and primary schools and secondary schools for talents? I mean, it run into the thousands. How many do they have in the Liaoning province? One. One. And it's a former coach, and he's how do I say this politically correct? Oh, bugger that. I'm not going to be politically correct. I don't have to be anymore. He's on the tape. So what happens is, let's say one of these schools out in the province somewhere, they have some school competitions, and there's some kid here he's just killing everybody running 100 and 200s. So the coach or teacher at that school will pick up the phone and he'll ring this number that will go to the guy who's in charge of recruitment for Liaoning province. So he'll go out to the school, sit there, look, and decide, oh yeah, this is good, and he'll decide, okay, we'll send him over to there. So what happens then is this kid is then given a scholarship. His parents are paid a truckload of money, or not a truckload, but they're paid a sizable amount of money, and he will get a salary from day one, where probably 95% of it gets sent home to his parents. But at the same time, that the guy who's in charge of recruitment, who found this talent, he'll get a bundle of cash under the table by the sports committee. So that's how it works. And then it just keeps going. So the further up into the hierarchy this kid gets, if he gets a provincial team spot, there's more money. It's like a draft in football. If you go up into the series system, there's more money, and there's more money to the guy who found him, who actually got a phone call from a school teacher. So that's their recruitment process. There is no recruitment process. It's total BS. And when you come to China the first time, you imagine this place, that they've got to have some sort of a system, but they haven't. There is no system. They simply do not understand process.
Which is mad, because they're famous for their processing systems in sort of export. You know what I mean?
I would think meticulous diligence, right? Like I wouldn't think throw shit to the wall and see what sticks. Or I shouldn't even say throw shit to the wall, see what sticks. The shit that falls off, just keep using it.
Oh, hell yeah, yeah. I mean, when I came to Dalian, it took me 6 months to get the group that I actually coached, which was, let's see, there was 6, 7, 8, no, I had 9 that I was in personal, that was my 100%, under my 100% care. 8 of them were injured. They all had chronic hamstring injuries. One of the pet things that the Chinese do is that they massage the crap out of everybody every night.
Yeah.
So when we coaches would go back to our rooms or apartments at the end of the evening, the athletes would then be called unknowingly by us, until we understood this, but they would be being called to the massage room to their therapist, and they have what they call doctors. But these doctors are, in fact, only very, very badly educated masseurs, and they have no idea what they're doing. And the only thing they do is they just get their elbows in and they just grind the shit out of them. So you'll have a guy who, let's say you've done a session of setting things up, doing some activation on Monday, because on Tuesday afternoon, we're going to run maximum speed. Forget it. Because when this kid comes out on Tuesday morning, he's about as limp as a piece of limp meat. There's nothing left. There's no tension. There's no nothing. It's all gone.
I wish I could say that was unique to China. The massage therapists here, I don't want to say aren't much different. However, all my pro guys, majority of my pro guys, unless I educate them otherwise, say, "Oh no, I should be good. I got a good massage last night." So what'd you do? So I got deep tissue. Like, well, we can't do anything high intensity now. So that's that's just not how it works. You had a high intensity thing last night. Like, you just got the shit kicked out of you. We're not doing it. So I wish I could say that was exclusive to China. That really isn't.
And then, of course, this mismatch of what they do in training is just, I mean, they will say that they're doing, let's say, a session what they call agility and strength endurance. And in that, they would do 10 hurdle bounds at a meter. Now, the only problem is that the first jump you're doing concentrically. After that, every time you land, you're actually doing a 1 meter or a 3-foot drop jump.
Yeah.
Now, there aren't too many athletes that, excel at 1 meter drop jumps. And I don't care what they look like. You've got to have an exceptional athlete. I mean, what's going to happen is if you do drop jumps with these guys, and let's say that these are jumpers or sprinters. I mean, we've got guys then that are supposed to be operating at 150 milliseconds and below. Otherwise, they're just not in the ball game. And these guys are prescribing not 1 session a week, but 3-4 sessions a week of plyometrics, doing drop jumps from a meter. So they're doing like 10 by 10 1 meter hurdles. So they're doing 100 drop jumps at a meter. So you can imagine, like after hurdle number 3, their ground contact times is probably in the vicinity of 250, 350 milliseconds.
Mm-hmm. And
after that pounding, they then happily send them over to the head coach and say, "Oh, coach, do your thing." Like, yeah, right. Well, come back in 3 weeks' time, because that's about what it's going to take for their, nervous system and their calf ankle complex to even get back on level terms again.
Were you were you in charge of any of the rehab over there?
No, thank God, no. We had a couple of guys that were connected to us. 2 Polish guys. They quit, went to table tennis, and they're getting some traction there. 2 of the best physios I've ever met. We had an osteopath, an Italian, brilliant, working with us. He quit and is now working in the US. Because, he would have, meticulously, he would know exactly what the athletes were, what they were doing, what the adjustments, why he was doing it. He knew what we were doing in training, what was coming up in the next 6-day cycle. So you wouldn't have to tell him anything. I mean, he ran his own show, of course. But unfortunately, when he got there and he realized that he would do things and he could see that, okay, now I did this and I got this result. And he was like, yes, this is great. And he'd come back the next morning and it'll be, what happened here? And, we have to tell him, well, they probably had massage last night. What do you mean massage? Who? What? When? And of course, after sort of like 6 months, he just threw in the towel and just said, oh, bugger this.
So they don't say anything about the massage. They just think it's good for you and this is just what we do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen the weightlifters, for example, who are the best weightlifters in the world. And in between maximum lifts, the guys will be sitting with their back up against the wall, feet straight out, and there'll be a guy walking up and down on their quads.
Yeah.
I mean, are you serious? I mean, they're lifting and setting world records despite this. That's and you try to explain this. They say, oh, look, I look at the results. Oh, yeah, I said, yeah, of course, yes. But, you're getting these results not as a result of what you're doing, but despite what you're doing. That's 2 bit different thought, we're in different ball games. And they just doesn't sort of, they just don't understand that. It's just like, okay, right, off that.
These champion weightlifters, what they must have been exposed to since they were children would be hilarious. It's if you could follow their life to see the sort of training that they must have gone through.
There's a British guy who's actually managed to get himself in there called Nathan Stockley. A real nice guy. He's also been at Loughborough.
Okay. What was his name?
Nathan Stockley.
Okay. No, I'm not heard.
How old would Nathan be? Probably, he's not 30, so he'd be 27, 28.
Okay.
Nice guy. And I mean, I used to try to just pick his brains and just say, look, come on, let's go down to Starbucks and tell me, what are these weightlifters doing? Because they won't let you in there. I mean, it's just, you cannot, even though they are inside the Olympic complex where we all and you know, you have free access virtually to every facility, bar two, swimming and weightlifting. You cannot get in there without virtually going up to President Xi Jinping and asking for permission.
Rolf, these Olympic centers, I mean, please tell Mike how, you know, vast and extravagant these places are, because I couldn't believe it when you were telling me.
Well, the Olympic Centre that we've got, which is the Summer Centre, which is on the 4th Ring Road, southeast of Beijing centre of Beijing. It is, oh, geez, how big would it be? It would be, the city block would probably be, I'd be a kilometre, a square kilometre by kilometre. Now, that's where we live. That's the compound. So that's where we've got all the apartments. There's a whole heap of medical centres. There are gyms and so forth for doing stuff, you know, within the compound. There are tennis centres, there are pools and stuff. And then we jump on a bus, or most of us have electric scooters, and we zip around the corner. It takes about 7 minutes at full throttle, which is the only way to go. And we then get down to what's called the NSTC, the National Sports Training Centre. And it is just mind-bogglingly big. And in there you've got, I don't know. You've got, for example, the main gym building would be, the ground floor would be, it'd be 100 metres by 50 metres. And it is absolutely jam-packed with the latest equipment from Kaiser, every manufacturer you can dream of. It's there. We've got it. Now, there is stuff there that's been put in there, like Cybex machines, which have been standing in rooms and never used. They have got a double quantum system. The only person in Beijing who knows how the quantum works is now sitting in front of you. So Randy is really teed off about that. So he's talking to me about every day, and I'm guiding him through how to work the 1080 quantum system, because he's been doing some stuff there. It's massive. And then you've got the table tennis hall. It's a 5-story building. Each floor would probably be, I don't know, 10,000 square feet times 5 floors. Just everything. For
table tennis.
Yeah, and then it just goes on. Then you've got the weightlifting, and then you've got 3 Olympic swimming pools. You've got 2 aquatic centres for diving. Then you've got, how many basketball courts have we got? I don't know, 6, 8? Yeah, something like that. Volleyball, I don't know, 6, 8. I mean, it just goes on and on. And then there is like 15-foot high metal fences and guards, and there's a 1, 2, there's 3 gates to get in, all guarded, all electronic gates. So if you're a fly and you don't have your credentials, you get shot.
And this is only one.
This is one. Yeah.
This is one of those centers, right?
Yeah.
How many
of them?
Well, there are, let's see, there are 34 provincial centres, and the provincial centre in Dalian that I worked was about a third of this size. So there are 34 of that size. And then you've got in Beijing, you've got what I just described. In Shanghai, you've got what I've described. And then in virtually most of the capital cities that have got 10 million or more, you'll have a centre comparable to this. So we're talking hundreds of centres of this size.
And there's no like private trainers. Everyone works for the government.
Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah. Private. What's that?
Yeah.
No, private. It doesn't exist, mate. You've got private business, yeah. I mean, it's all everybody who works in the market and all that sort of thing. But if you're involved in sports, no. You can't do anything. The big trend now, of course, is physical. Is gyms opening up. They're opening up franchises to gyms, and that's just it's virtually like, you know, mushrooms in the forest. They just pop up. Like you walk past a block on Tuesday in that area where we are, and then on Thursday you walk past the same block, and then all of a sudden there's a gym there. And you go, what? And it's like 3 floors, and it's like, you know, like 800, 1,000 square feet or whatever, or 10,000 square feet each floor. I mean, there's nothing that's, you know, like a little facility. Well, I mean, little facility like elite training in Zurich, where Alex was. There's nothing like that in China. Nothing. I mean, you've got. I mean, there's 34 million people in Beijing. I mean, what are you going? I mean, you can't have a small gym. I mean, what are you going to do? You can't survive because all your competitors have got massive big gyms. Sure. So everything is volume. This is where it's sort of crazy, because everything in China is just volume. You got to sell lots. You got to have lots. It's just everything is volume based. It's just, you know, keep the wheels are turning.
What was you when you were saying about they were in this process of building loads of ice rinks? How many were they about to build?
I'm not sure about the ice rink, but what they were doing with football, they were going to open up 5,000 football academies. And I met a couple of guys from England who had been working in League One and League Two clubs in England. I've actually got them on WeChat, which is the Chinese Facebook, which is actually brilliant. It makes Facebook look stupid. It just does immaculate things. It's crazy. It really is. That's another story. And these two guys, they were in charge of an academy. And I think they had, what did they say? They had 440 students in their academy.
Times 5,000, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, everything, I mean, you know, you usually think, oh, you've been to there and I've been there, you've been to the US and, you know, big numbers. And then you go to China and everything just pales, because it's, I mean, you know, like Beijing, 34 million people, Shanghai, 31 or 29 million, whatever. I mean, you know, I've been to cities for competitions that I've never heard of, you know, like, and you ask somebody, how many people live here? Oh, 17 million. Really? 17 million? That's bigger than London. You know, you never heard of it. Never heard of it.
You're mad. Purely
it's
mad.
Crazy. Yeah. So, absolutely. I mean, so China is, it's a contradiction. And I think for people like me and Randy who have a deep passion for track and field, or sports, but in our particular case, track and field, you just sort of get bitten by this bug. And it's just, you know, I mean, to be quite honest, if I got a good enough offer from China again, it'd be damn difficult to say no, because you know that despite all the problems, you know that you've got the best equipment, you've got the best facilities, you've got, I mean, it is just crazy amount of talent. But then you know that there is a political system, and there is, you know, a few things on the side, sports science and rehabilitation, which is like, oh, it's back in the dark ages. You know,
talking about rehab, I mean, I'm not sure if you saw any of the old podcasts that I'd sent you from me and Mike, but Mike is actually finishing his doctorate in acupuncture.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, which is very interesting, because if you'd know Mike, you would never think he would ever do this. So, and he's, you know, he's built up, you know, his very own personal philosophy system based on it and different stuff like that. What did you see in terms of the medical facility and the rehab over there? That, you know, was it predominantly like TCM stuff, or was it also Western medicine? And could you go into a little bit about your experience with that? Because I think that'd be super interesting for you and Mike to go back and forth on some of this.
Well, to give you an idea, within the track and field team, in the last year that I worked in China, we had 2 cases where and one was actually in just before the preliminary. Was it the qualifying or was it the final? Well, it doesn't matter. One of the javelin throwers had her lung punctured by the acupuncturist.
Yep.
And that's happened several times. The other one was a swimmer at also I think it was the Asian Championships. Had his lung punctured.
Yep.
It's crazy. I mean, I have a lady that I go to here. She's a nurse, and she actually went to China and did her course in acupuncture in China. Yet I've lived in China virtually, well, on and off now since 2016. I've lived there for well over 2 years, full time. I'm still not able to find one single person that I would go and get acupuncture of that I would trust. Not one. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, this is the home of acupuncture, and we in the national team, we have to virtually scour the countries from top to bottom to find one person that we can actually trust to do acupuncture. So most of the medical staff is all foreign. They're American, they're Polish. As I said, I've met 2 Polish guys that I hope I can do something with in the future who are absolutely, I've never met 2 physiotherapists at this level. And I mean, I was an international class decathlete myself, and I've been in this game for so many years. So I've seen good physios and I've seen bad physios, but these 2 guys, I mean, I'm not the sort of person who throws sort of the term miracle worker around, but I mean, what these guys do is just phenomenal.
Name drop. Who are they? Shout them out.
One is the president of the Polish Strength and Conditioning Association, and he's actually the strength and conditioning coach of the men's table tennis team, but he's also a physiotherapist. His name is Bartek Bibrovich. The other one is a Polish physiotherapist called Rafał Henia. Now, the interesting thing about Rafał, he mastered his craft by working in geriatric hospitals in Poland, where virtually he could test any theory that he wanted, he could test. So in a period of 10 years, this guy was just doing stuff that nobody else could do anywhere else, because, I mean, not saying that he's doing bad things, but he was just able to try different types of protocols and wouldn't have to go through the rigmarole of having to sign papers and, I'm going to do this, and it had to be peer reviewed. What are you doing? What's the outcome? Blah, blah. You guys know all the ins and outs of all this. So he was able to virtually just go through the human anatomy, and he has this, I mean, you guys know what RPR is,
mm-hmm.
which Cal Dietz that. I mean, Rafał has an RPR that makes Cal's look, I mean, it looks silly. It looks like it's still sort of in kindergarten, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen him do stuff, and I mean, I hurt myself a couple of times doing stupid stuff as usual. And, he did stuff with me that I'm going, what? And it's all about re-educating the nervous system and the muscular system, and he works a great deal through positioning of joints, so that all the sensors that are coming out of the joints, that's actually what's telling the muscles what to do, when to shut off, when to shut down, when to go, when to stop. And he does a lot of work in teaching. As soon as you have an injury or you have a problem, he goes in very quickly, and he does a lot of very, very weird exercises, and he gets you in all sorts of crazy positions to isolate muscle groups. And then he'll just ask you to, okay, here, do you know what a dead bug is? Yeah, okay, but I want you to do the dead bug like this. And then he's got a variant of a dead bug. And all of a sudden, you've got your trunk firing and everything's going exactly where it should be. And all of a sudden, you've got athletes who can't stand up and reach overhead because their scapula is not rotating back and round, so they can't get full extension. And all of a sudden, bang, he's fixed that, and they haven't done anything. I mean, all he's done is he's just sequenced the muscles to work in the right firing order. And, you know, I've stood there and watched him for hours and just in total awe. I mean, we've had sprinters who have, you know, they've been a wreck for running too many comps and training and the fact that they're running so fast. And this guy just comes in and, you know, bang, Bob's your uncle, and these guys are, you know, they're ready to rock and roll. And
cool.
I've never seen that before.
Super interesting.
So there's a lot of very, very talented people in China. And that is also, I mean, what I've learned since 2016, to be quite honest, even though I do a lot of, you know, I talk to a lot of people. I've specialised in eccentric training, strength and conditioning, and power and speed. That's my area of expertise, apart from the technical aspects of certain events in track and field. But I mean, what I've learned in the last 4 years, I probably didn't learn in the preceding 20 years.
Crazy, such as go into that, because you have a very unique philosophy to training, and it's been really impactful to me, and I'm sure Mike would love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, well, as you know, Alex, I mean, I don't work after periodization. I work after what I call an accumulation intensification period. So I just undulate between accumulation and intensification in, depending on the athlete, between 2 and 4 week blocks. I mean, when I was an athlete, and we're still many places in the world today, you have the classical periodization, bang, 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 your GP, your special strength, your specific strength, and then your speed phase. So you're running fast 4 weeks of the year. That's impossible. And the only reason why, I mean, this is my belief. The only reason why people were running fast, despite that, is because they were juiced up. Now, if you're going to run fast and not be juiced up, you've got to run fast all year round. And the only way you can do that is by high intensity, low volume, lots of rest. That you cannot do it in any other way. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I've heard a coach say that you can only really get true speed work, and maybe 3 sets of 60 meters, and then anything after that isn't going to be much. Like, you're not doing real speed work. You're doing more capacity work after that.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a big discussion here with some people regarding. I did a webinar last week with the the Korean Football Association, with their first league and their national team. And I asked them, and they said that they were doing speed work. And I said, okay, so define speed. And they would say, oh, we're running 85, 90%. And I said, that's warm up for a sprinter. That's warm up. If I've got a guy who's running 10 flat and he's doing 90% sprints, he's running 11 seconds. He can virtually do that running backwards. That's how big a difference it is. I mean, they virtually will jog 11 seconds. So what will 90% sprints do for my sprinter? Over a short period of time, it'll maintain what he's got. For a 6-week period, he's going to drop. For a 3-month period, we're in deep shit. I mean, if you're not running at an interval of 95 to 102% about every 7 to 10 days, you ain't in it.
Yeah.
And that is 10 months of the year. And and people then think, oh shit, I've got to go out and do this straight away. But of course, it's called progression. This is something you start with a 17, 18-year-old, and you build up so that they can handle this type of intensity by the time they're 24, 25. And then you might do some absolutely absurd stuff when you've got somebody who's been at it for a long period of time, who's plateaued. And the other thing, what happens is when you've got an athlete that has been with you for a long time, or not even that you're coaching, but he's been around for a long time, what worked 2, 3, 4 years ago for peaking doesn't work this year, because they've gotten better. They've adapted. You know, I mean, the human organism is the most prolific survival mechanism on this planet. It will survive. I mean, probably the only thing that's even worse is a virus or a bacteria. So, you know, we're sort of engineered to survive and to adapt. So, you know, it sort of doesn't make any sense then to sort of try and do a bulk of training and do it for a very short period of time and think we're going to get adaptation out of that. The only adaptation that we're going to get is that we're going to get chronically sore and probably break down, because we just haven't done the amount of lead up work to facilitate that type of training and competition. And that is the biggest problem, that today there's so much hype and money and sponsors and everything. So if you're a world-class sprinter, you've got to run indoors and you've got to run outdoors. So when do you rest? I mean, you are racing twice a year, 3 months in the winter and 3-4 months in the summer. So you're racing 6 months of the year. So, you know, you've got to be smart. And so I do a lot of work, and the way I work, a lot of people just go, no, you can't do it that way. And yeah, fine. That's, you know, that's up to you. This is how I work. I haven't written any books. I have no Olympic gold medalists, but I've been able to produce a lot of athletes in different sports at a very high level, and nobody's ever been injured. I've never had a hamstring tear in nearly 40 years of coaching. I think, you know, that's pretty unique. And I had jumpers in the national teams in both Australia and Sweden. I've had sprinters, I've had javelin throwers, I've had decathletes in the top 10 at the Olympics. Not one single hamstring injury, never.
So would you say that, how would you structure, you go accumulation, intensification, how would you structure your progression? Would you do a short to long approach, or would your accumulation phase be a long to short approach, and then your intensification phase be a short to long?
Good question. Early on, I was probably more inclined to be a long to short, and I realized very quickly that ain't going to work.
Yeah.
The first thing you've got to do, if you're involved in power and speed events, you've got to learn how to run fast first. Then you can build endurance to whatever it needs to be for your event. And that means, for example, the very stereotype amongst track coaches is that they run flying 30s. The first time I met Charlie Francis, now Charlie was, unfortunately, because of what happened with Ben, Charlie was ostracized, and he was just persona non grata after. And he came to Australia after Seoul and was actually lecturing at gyms. That's the only way he could make a living.
Yeah.
He was actually bumming around the world, and I walked into the gym where I was training at the Tuong Shopping Centre in Brisbane, and I walked past and I saw this guy sitting on my left, and I'm going, fuck, that was Charlie Francis. No, what's Charlie Francis doing in this bloody place? So I walked into the change room, got changed, walked back out and thought, I'll go out and have a look. Walked out and looked again. And I said to him, you're Charlie Francis. And he goes, yep, I was this morning. You know, and I spent the next 4 days, I was working in real estate. That's how you coach in Australia. There are no coaches. I was selling real estate, and I actually rang my boss and said, I'm sick. So for the next 4 days, I sat virtually, I think Charlie was ready to kill me. I was picking this guy's brain for 4 days. I would not leave him for 5 seconds. He was a unique opportunity, because this guy, honestly, he was so far ahead of everybody else. Now let's forget about all the doping and everything. But what you've got to realize with Ben was not a guy who just popped out of nowhere and ran 9:79. Ben came through very, very gradually and ran very fast. Big difference. Charlie was so far ahead of everybody else in his approach to training, his methodology. And one of the things that Charlie said to me, and when we did a session, actually, I invited him out to my group. And he said, okay, so you're going to do some speed work. Yeah, okay. So he watched them warm up. And then he went out and he put out 2 markers, and they were about 12 meters apart. And he said, right, we're doing flying 12s. And I looked at him and said, well, we were going to do flying 20. Oh, none of these can run flying 20s.
Yeah. Yep.
And I said to him, what do you mean? Oh, technically they can't run flying 20s. They can run flying 12s. And then they can run flying 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That was Charlie's approach. So very early on, I realized that the only approach doing power and speed is to go from short to long. And I've never gone the other way around. And Randy, that I've worked with now in China for 4 years, he does exactly the same thing. It's you always build a base for being able to lift, have power, have speed, and then you increase that to whatever you need it to be. But you learn how to run.
So during your accumulation phases then, right? Do you let's say your intensification phase is what, like a 20, a flying 12 or so. Would you say during your intensification phase, you'll do 5 reps, but then during your accumulation phase, in preparation for the intensification, you'll do 5 series of 5 reps or 4 reps with limited rest to get them to get them prepared for the high intensity to increase the volume in that manner? Is that something you would do?
Yeah. For example, if we're going to do, let's say we're going to do maximum speed on Wednesday afternoon, then we'll spend Monday, Tuesday's sessions setting up, getting ready for Wednesday afternoon. Mm-hmm. So we'll spend 3 sessions. So we'll have 2 sessions on Monday. We'll rest Monday or Tuesday morning. We'll do some acceleration work on resisted work on Tuesday, rest Wednesday morning, and then we'll come out and blast on Wednesday afternoon.
So what would your 2 workouts be on Monday? You do a speed session in the morning, weight session at night?
Yeah, could be. We usually activation. We do a lot of activation work. With Randy introduced me to, apparently you can't get them anymore. It's called Exogen. The Exergenie. Yeah.
Okay.
We use that a lot with the sprinters and the jumpers. So they do a lot of activation work. So most of their drills is done either with 6 bands on, or 4 bands, or 2 bands, depending on where they are and which cycle we're in. So it'll be a hard and easy or a medium session of activation. And then in the afternoon, we could do some light tempo work, which means they're just virtually stride out. So, you might run 100s, 120s, 60, 80, 100, 120, and then rest on Tuesday morning. And then we have, for example, an acceleration session then Tuesday afternoon, rest Wednesday morning, or an activation Wednesday morning just to warm up, and then blast maximum speed on Wednesday afternoon.
And how far would you, I mean, obviously Tuesday's more of your primer. How far would you sprint during your acceleration work? 10s, 20s?
Yeah, 10, 20, maybe 30, but often.
And at what volume?
Again, depends a little bit, but they're never big volumes.
Yeah.
I mean, we look more at how much we're slowing down the athlete. For example, we know now that in the acceleration phase, I can slow them down about 20% before I start screwing up their mechanics and their feel for what they're doing. If I start loading them more, either with a robotic resistance or with towing something, sleds or whatever, or pushing sleds, which is a different matter. For pushing sleds is not horizontal, it's vertical. And a lot of people don't realize that. When you've got a sled with 2 big poles in the back of it, you're actually pushing up at about a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
So it's not a horizontal, and that is something that a lot of people do not take into consideration. So they do a lot of what do you guys call it, the prowler?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do a lot of prowler work, which is great, but you've got to realize it is virtually, you're targeting the part of the acceleration after about 10, 15 meters when they're starting to get semi up and they're getting more upright. That's when the prowler starts doing its thing. But the initial acceleration, it's all horizontal. So you've got to be pulling something from that position, from that low down position. So that's where the robotic resistance for the 1080 sprint is so unique, because the biggest resistance that you want is that in the first 2-3 strides, and then you want the resistance to disappear. So you might go from 15 kilos down to 3 kilos over an acceleration of 30 meters. So now I'm mimicking exactly what's happening during the acceleration, where I've got to overcome my own weight and inertia initially. So
from a volume standpoint, I mean, you're dealing with sprinters, and this is what they do. They sprint. But I know with my pro guys, if I were to have them, my NFL guys, like the guys that would probably be classified as like low intermediate guys. I have some guys running like 0.88, 10 splits, which are pretty solid.
Yeah.
I know if I were to have them run a leg day, like a speed day on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, let's say were our main days, and I were to have them do flying sprints, max velocity on a Wednesday. If I had him run a 30 on a Tuesday, there'd be almost no way he'd be able to do it. I think if we were to do any primer stuff, it'd have to be like 10s, 15s. But again, they're not the max sprinter. They're not the pure sprinter, so they couldn't take it. But that's interesting. You'll go as high as 30 meters. I wouldn't think to do that. And with these guys, they're reaching close to max velocity by then.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, some of these guys, they'll be towing, sort of like 10 kilos, and already at the sort of the 10, 12 meter mark, they're reaching 8.8 meters per second, and they're towing 12 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to realize these guys weigh like the ones we have. They're not physically big, very strong, massively strong, but they weigh 70, 73 kilos. I mean, Sue, for example, he's pushing, and one of the long jumpers who's an absolute monster, young guy, Rain, they are getting very close to 5,000 watts on the Kaiser squat at 190 kilos. And these guys weigh 70, 73 kilos. I mean, I've done a lot of work with pro hockey in Sweden, and Sweden's one of the best hockey nations in the world. And I work with probably the best team as a consultant for the last decade here in Sweden. They're way up the north of Sweden. And they have, on an average, they probably are pumping around 28 to 32 watts per kilo body weight when we test them. And that is very good by hockey standards. The group that we had in Beijing, they're pumping 50 to 58 watts per kilo body weight. I mean, you've got guys who weigh this, and they're doing single leg step-ups, dynamic step-ups, 20 centimeter step-ups with 190 kilos, 420 pounds.
So what's their limiting factor outside of their Olympic committee?
Usually it's the fact that, and this is where it gets very interesting. Now, what happens in China when one of these sports teachers finds a talent, and he says, "Oh, look, little Ji Ping here, he's fantastic at long jump." Then what happens is little Ji Ping, he becomes a long jumper at age 13. Now, in there lies then a massive problem, because there are, in my way of thinking, there are 8 fundamental movement patterns that you've got to master as an athlete. You've got to be able to pull, push, rotate, hinge, jump, land, rotate, and throw. Now, if you haven't got those tools, so your movement capabilities, your toolbox of movements doesn't incorporate those 8 things, what's going to happen is, and this is where we've seen a great deal in China, is that we have athletes who are extremely gifted, fantastically gifted, and we just run into a brick wall at certain levels. Mm-hmm. And what we then find when we start backtracking and sort of making easier exercises and going from complex to isolated and back and forth, what we find and have found is that they're lacking 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these 8 tools, which means that we can't get them to the next level, both physically, but mostly technical, because they just simply don't have the feel, because they're missing the rotation or the hinge or the jump and land or the push pull. So you can't do it. For example, Ocean, the sprinter I got, he'd never lifted. The guy was running 10-20. He'd never lifted. He couldn't, I mean, he was strong because he was so gifted. But if you gave him like 80 kilos, which 176 pounds for a clean, and do a power clean, I mean, the bar could be that far in front of him. And, you know, he was virtually about to rip his whole spine out. So, and because he was so explosive, it wasn't slow. It was just like bang, and it'd be gone. And, you know, you couldn't get him to do anything because of anything that would give any adaptation, because his technique was just non-existent. So here's a guy who's 25 or 26, and the first thing I've got to do, I've got to teach him all the fundamentals that I need him to be able to do, so that I can get him to do training on a progression that's going to make him adapt and run faster. So for me, one of the key things, and one of my pet things that I get everybody's case here in Sweden, is that if we have a system like we have in Sweden, where a lot of parents go in and help in clubs and so forth, who've got no, apart from they maybe ran a little bit of track themselves, but they've got no idea what they're doing. And you know, and they're sweethearts and they're doing a great job and everything, but they're missing 50, 60, 70% of these 8 fundamental movement patterns. So by the time the kids get to a certain age, we run into trouble, because we can't load them anymore, and we can't progress because there isn't a movement pattern that can handle what we want to do. So we're stuck having to do, and the only way out of that, and this is where it gets, and this is where volume comes into China, because they also understand that they can't do anything else. So what is the answer? Well, you backtrack to where they can handle it, and then you just do a shit volume more.
Yeah. So how are you quantifying these movements then? These 8 limiting factors?
I mean, you know, pull, push. I mean, everything that you're pulling, just pulling, pushing from different standing, kneeling. It's just coordination. Mm-hmm. It's just going from simple isolated movements to complex movements. Games, simple games to complex games that involve rapid limb movement and change of direction. That is what kids between 9 and 14 have to do. That is going to be what's limiting them when they get older.
So Rolf, if you was to have, you know, your son, for example, he's a very talented football goalie, right? What did you do to counteract in this early specialization? Because also modern day sport almost requires it in some ways, right? Maybe it's not the best way to do it, but also you got to kind of play the game just to even get through it in some ways, especially in the US system with the way that they do all the stuff, right? So what would be your recommendations then for young kids to get all of this? Is it just play?
Yeah, I play, and I think what we do wrong in many places is that we specialize too soon. I mean, kids come down and say, "Oh, I want a long jump," and then we let them long jump. But you know, there are so many other things that we've got to get in there. So they should be long jumping. They should be high jumping. They should be pole vaulting. They should be sprinting, hurdling. They should be lifting. They should be throwing medicine balls. This is what gets them these movement patterns. When I look back on my own career and when I sat down and started doing coaching and coaching clinics and education to become a coach because of my injuries in my late 20s, I realized that my feeling for technique had come about because of the fact that as a young kid, I played cricket, I played rugby, I swam, I paddleboard, you know, I did a multitude of sports. I played tennis. I mean, I played squash. I mean, you name it. If there was something that was sports, I was doing it. I mean, I was never home. So I was getting all these movement patterns from a variety of sports. And that's how we, you know, back in the 60s and 70s, when I grew up, which is half a century ago, that was it. I mean, that's how you did sports in Australia, and especially where I come from, where it's semi-tropical. You know, you don't have any winter. You don't need indoor facilities. You're outside every day, all year round.
So you think the plastic nature of adolescence is what ingrains the abilities for all these qualities to be enhanced, and then you think that door shuts, so it's like it's just not attainable. The proprioception just is no longer, the ceiling is already there.
The proprioception you can do a little bit about, but what we definitely, I've seen, and you know, I've seen a couple of scientific reports which, you know, say no, this is blah blah blah. Whatever you do between 9 and 14 to open the central nervous system to moving fast, moving your limbs fast, whatever you've done there, that is going to dictate how fast you're going to run as a senior. You will not increase limb speed from age 14 till between 14 and 25 or whatever, whenever you know, or 30, the rest of your career. The limb speed that you could attain as a 14-year-old, that is what you've got. The only thing you can do after 14 is just build more strength and power. Now, there has been several studies that have come out from the NFL. When are the guys the fastest in the NFL? Well, it's their first year of college, because they're still pretty lean and don't weigh very much out of high school. When they get to college, they start bulking up, so their power to weight ratio drops. Sure, they're more resilient maybe for the game and so forth, but they don't get any faster.
Yeah.
They don't get any faster.
Yeah, limb velocity peaks. That makes sense.
Yeah. So whatever you can do. So I love doing. For example, I started working with a hockey team back in 99. Was it 99? No, 96, 97 to 2001. I was in charge of the second division hockey team. So the whole physical training from the young kids up to the senior team. And what I started doing with them was to play short-sided basketball games and floor hockey games. And all hell broke loose. And there were parents who would come in to the general manager and complain, "Oh, this bloody coach, he's got my son playing bloody basketball. They're playing basketball 3 days a week. I'm paying you people money my son's here to play bloody hockey. He's going to be an NHL star." And so I'm trying to have to explain to them, look, what I'm trying to do here is open up their neurological system so it can adapt, and it can actually progress, so that we're going to get fast, explosive guys in 4 or 5 years' time. But that was sort of like a losing battle.
Yeah, I remember hearing a lecture from Dan Paff saying that when he was coaching high school kids, he was having them he took the basketball players, and they come out of basketball season and their jumps would be, they're high jumpers, they'd be phenomenal. then he'd do this terrific program of periodization with them, and it was perfect and it was brilliant. And then by the end of the season, they all jumped lower, or by mid-season they were all jumping lower. So he was like, "Oh shit, guys, go play basketball." And then they come back, and then their high jumps would be up again. Yeah, so that's
see, this was something I learned from Randy, because when I first met Randy years and years ago, I started saying to Randy, okay, so how many jumps did you do with Mike? And he was Mike Powell's coach. Like how much was Mike doing then, and how much was Willie Banks doing? Blah blah, nothing. I'm going, no plyometrics. What do you mean? Bullshit. You can't bloody jump 18 meters in a triple jump and don't do any plyometrics. And he just looked at me and said, look, you stupid Australian. This is how it works. So what do these brothers do? What have they been doing since they virtually popped out of their mum? They've been playing basketball. I mean, these guys have probably done how many hoop jumps? How many layups have these guys been doing since they were 12 years old, out on the streets and at school and everything? So most of these kids have done a zillion plyometric jumps playing basketball. So do you need to get Willie Banks, and do you need to get Mike Powell doing plyometrics as seniors? Bugger hell, no. Yeah. Waste of bloody time. I mean, that capacity, they've got so much elasticity, they could sell it out the bloody in the city square. It's a waste of time, And this is. I mean, you meet people like Randy and Charlie Francis, and you think, shit, I'm a good coach. I've got a guy who's he's hotshot in Australia, and you realise, shit, I know nothing. I have got Buckleys. I know zip. So I mean, when I met Charlie, I mean, I thought I was hot shit. I mean, this is like in 89. I thought I had a couple of guys who were the top 3 in Australia, set Australian records, that sort of thing in the decathlon. And I thought I was like, I'm the dude. And I walked away after 4 days with Charlie thinking, bugger, I know nothing. I know nothing. I mean, it was such a humiliating and such a sort of like, get your foot back on the ground, or both feet on the ground. Get out of the clouds, boy, because you've got no reason to be in the clouds at all. And then you trot along and you think, oh, great, now I've got it. And then you meet Randy and you're sort of like, oh, shit. Like, I mean, I really can't say. I think there are very few people who realise just how good Randy Huntington is. I would say that he's probably, if you were to say in the last 50 years, who are the top 3-4 coaches ever in track and field, Randy is one of them. The man is, it's crazy. He's just, the amount of knowledge that he's got and the depth that he's got. I mean, I don't even go there when it comes to sports injuries, and I hang around and watch the therapists and try to learn as much as I can, of course, for warm-up techniques and whatnot. But I mean, Randy's at a total different level. I mean, he'll go in and he'll virtually just tell them bang, 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 bang. Look, check this guy's plantaris. It's screwed. And while you're at it, look at his bloody blah, 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 blah. And the therapist going, well, how did you know that? Oh, well, I know. It's like, okay. I mean, for example, I had no idea. 8 out of 10 Achilles, so-called Achilles problems are actually plantaris tendon problems, because the plantaris goes across the top of the calf and down the inside of the calf and right next to the Achilles tendon. So if the plantaris muscle or tendon is inflamed, it'll actually trigger a pain along the sheath of the Achilles tendon, and you will swear that you've got Achilles tendon problems, and you'll get treated for Achilles tendon problems, but the whole problem is the plantaris muscle or the tendon. I learned that from Randy. And it's crazy. I've had athletes who've just said, I can't run, coach, I can't run. And you send them over to the physio and you say, look, Rafael, look at his plantaris. and he'll just put his finger on him, and the guy's, he's 6 feet off the bench. And 10 minutes later, they've treated him, released that, and he's good to go, and there's no problem.
This is an interesting thing with pain, right? And this is one of the things that me and Mike spoke about, I think, in one of our first podcasts, is that, you can be so convinced that you've got some sort of debilitating issue, and with a good warm up and with someone that, like you said, with magic hands, you can quickly turn it around. And I mean, it makes complete sense, right? I mean, if your house was about to burn down and your wife and kids are upstairs and you've got a hamstring, strain, I'm pretty sure you're going to move pretty damn quick. I don't think that's going to be bothering you too much. So,
yeah, no.
Rolf, one of the things I wanted to ask is, I mean, you're working with sort of like the creme de la creme, and definitely in the 0.00% of the population in terms of genetically gifted people. Your sort of program, as it's developed, is it much more simple now than it ever has been? Or what's been the progression? How's it, where's it been? How is it now? And where do you see it going as time goes on?
I hear a lot of confirmation bias coming up.
Well, that's a very good point. And one of the things that I learned from Charlie, and it was again when I met Randy and spoke with him, he had the same philosophy, and it's sort of just kept going from the years when I first met Randy. And that is that the more knowledge that I've gotten, the simpler my programs have become.
Yeah, called that one.
Yeah. And, I look back, behind me here, I'm sitting in my office. I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 10 shelves of all the training programs I've written throughout the years. And some of these, I can pull some of the stuff I was doing with the decathlete that I had back in 88, 92, who set an Australian record. It was 10th at Barcelona. And when I look at what I was doing with him, I'll start to cry. I would virtually start crying. I'm just sitting here going, oh, for the love of God. How did that guy ever do over 8,000 points? Shit. If you could have coached this guy, he could have bloody medaled. You idiot. It is, training programs that were like just the amount of volume of time. You'd sort of have this crazy notion that, you had to fix everything every week, and everything, you had to tinker with everything. If there was a foot placement wrong, you fixed it. And if they were dorsal flexing here and they're supposed to be plantar flexing over here, let's fix that. And you'd jump into it, and you'd be fiddling around with that. And, for God's sake, it's back to the old thing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. One of the things that I learned very quickly was that why don't African-American or Jamaican sprinters have problems with their feet? Very simple. They're all flat-footed. They can't bust up their arches because they don't have any arches. These guys can pound the pavement 940 days of the year. It's not going to matter. But you get a German or a Swede with high arches, and you start doing plyometrics and a few things, and all of a sudden you're in a world of problems. And some of them, it can be very, very difficult to get out of. You don't have that problem with these guys, and they splay, their feet are like all over the place. And and I'm a very good friend with Rainer Ryder, and he's got a great crew. And I was with him last year in Germany, and he's got a Jamaican guy, Ty, and he's running sort of 995. And and I was looking at his feet, and I'm going, Jesus, he looks like a bloody duck. One foot's internally rotating, the other one's externally rotating. And I'm sort of standing there thinking, when's Rainer going to tell him something about his bloody feet? But the guy's running 995. What do you want to screw up his feet for? Leave him alone. It's working. That's not the problem. The issues why he's not running 985 are different. It's not the feet.
Yeah.
And that I think was what the biggest mistake I did was as a young fledgling coach, was that I thought I had to fix everything. I had to be everywhere and fix everything. So I had these massive, big programs, and I mean, I've got a couple of programs here, but most of them I've burnt because, I mean, if somebody saw them, they'd probably shoot me. I mean, it's like, you know, it's like a Bible. It's like 365-page, you know, training program. I mean, the fact that, you know, how many kids will even pick it up and take it home? I mean, you know, they virtually need a cart to take it home. It weighs 10 pounds. It's just stupid. I mean, and today, you know, I'll write, like, for example, here's a sprint microcycle for, what's that? That's 10 days. So there's 10 days. There's 10 days. And then, of course, I've got a lot of, like Randy has as well. Randy's much worse than I am. He's got programs for everything. But, you know, we have a whole bunch of different types of warm-up programs, and they've all got all these funny names, Arizona and the Titanic and the Burst Your Bubble and God knows, you know. And they're all just, all they are is trying to do something with these 8 movement patterns. So we're just activating these movement patterns and setting them up for activation for what we want to do on the afternoon or the day after. And I mean, what I did, and unfortunately it's still what a lot of coaches do today, is they just overwork it. I mean, it's like, hell, I mean, once the steak's cooked, you know, or grilled, after that it's charcoal.
Yeah.
So I'm very much in simplifying. I like to simplify. And also, I mean, let's face it, if you know, if we remember back, we've all been athletes, I imagine. So think about if you had a coach when you were younger who just couldn't shut up. He was just blabbing on the whole bloody time about do this, do that, think about this. I mean, it's overload. You're just not going to be able to do anything.
That's why some of the dumbest athletes are some of the best athletes, because they don't overthink shit. And a lot of the time it goes in one ear, out the other. And the whole making it in spite of your coach is absolutely true.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that Randy and I had problems with in China, because we do a lot of work very close on one-on-one in the training arena. Once we get to competitions, we look at the warm-up. We might have a few things to say, but we say very little during competitions. You know, we might just, you know, like move back 10 centimeters, move forward, just think about, you know, very, very subtle indications of just pick up the speed the last 3 strides. You know, you're accelerating a little bit too fast off your check mark, the coach's check mark or whatever we've got. We do very, very little, because we both have the philosophy of we do our coaching when we're actually doing the preparing. Coaching, you don't coach an athlete at a competition. At a competition, you put it on auto and you let the guy or the girl do their shit, and that's where we see what we've been able to do in training. We can see where the mistakes are coming. Now, if I'm there virtually nursing them around the whole bloody competition, how in the hell am I going to see what's working and not working with my coaching?
Mm-hmm.
So I leave my athletes virtually to themselves to about 90% in competitions. And that the Chinese don't like, because the Chinese coaches, they are in your face, up your rear end, 24/7. And if you aren't doing that as a foreign coach, the boss will come down and say, look, you know, you need to be doing some coaching here. But that's not going to help, because what we've done for the last 3 months, that's what's going to sort of do get the bacon cooked tomorrow at the competition. Not me running around there like a neck chicken, screaming and yelling and jumping around. That ain't going to buy it. And Chinese just they don't understand that. They think that the more, and this is very funny. There are some American coaches. There are a few former Eastern Bloc coaches that are in China who yell and scream, and they are absolutely fucking bat crazy. And honestly, they should have been sent home 10 years ago. But they're still in China because the administrators love them because they personify them with that they're doing a great job because they're very, very boisterous. They're yelling and screaming and chasing the athletes 24/7. That's great.
Do all the athletes speak English?
No.
So how is you yelling at their interpreter gonna help the situation?
Well, I hope Randy doesn't hear this. Randy's probably fired more the interpreters than I've had underwear in the last 2 weeks. It's the biggest problem is a lot of the interpreters, they come out straight out of uni. They've learned English. Most of them have never done any sport. They have no idea. So what will happen is, and this was evident when I came to Dalian, the girl that I had there, lovely girl, but she was a pain in the ass and she had no idea about anything that had anything to do with sports. And track and field, we can forget that. And I would tell her, okay, I want them to think about this, and I'd give them the instructions, and then she would interpret. And you just stand there and you'd look at the facial expressions of the guys, and you realize that when she was finished, they had no idea what she said. None. And you go, oh, fuck, what am I going to do now? And so I'd ring Randy. I said, Randy, do you realize that the bloody interpreter has got no idea what she's talking about? Oh, you've worked that out, have you? Oh, you're a bright boy. And I'd say, look, I rang you because I want some advice. Yeah, okay, I just gave you. So you've learned something. They know batshit nothing. So what do you want me to say? Well, what do I do? Well, if they're absolutely bat crazy, fire them.
Fire them.
Get a new one. You know, and it's sort of like, I mean, for a Western person, I mean, we don't like going around firing people because of, you know, what we perceive as being for no good reason. But in this case, you've got to do it because otherwise I just can't get anything done because it's just going to take what should take an hour. It takes 6 hours. And I mean, you know, there's only 8 hours in a working day sort of thing. So you're getting nowhere. So that is also a big problem. We've had interpreters, and we have interpreters with us all the time. And you've got to realize that the interpreters are also spies for the administration and the government.
Sure.
So if you badmouth China or say something, I mean, I don't know who said it, but I mean, we said something that was perceived as being derogatory to the Chinese government and at a competition, and we both got called up by our respective administrators and were asked to explain why we shouldn't be fired and sent home. And they've thought, how the hell, was there a CCTV camera around there anywhere? No. How the hell did they find that out? Ah, the interpreters. Aha. Right. So after that sort of little, you know, experience, then you realize, nah, you don't say buckers to these guys because they tell the boss straight away.
It must have been a good opportunity also for the athletes though, because I mean, if you're not communicating so much, I see it, you know, it's probably not just in China, but also I see it a lot over here too, is, you know, especially young people, they're so used to getting told what to do, that they have this, they don't develop this sense of individual characteristic inside themselves, you know, to try new things or, you know, to believe that they know really what they need to do. You know what I mean? So they just become just another robot in this system that just keeps on going, you know. And how was it, you know, over in China? Because, I mean, they have so much genetic diversity. They could probably compete with anybody in also team sports, but you don't see them do too good in team sports. You know what I mean? They're good at track and field where they don't have to think much or be creative, but, you know.
Yeah, no. And one of the reasons that is if, for example, if you were to give me 10 absolutely super gifted athletes, and let's say that 5 of them are female and 5 men, which one do you think I would pick?
The female.
Yeah. The reason is because in the in the former Chinese system, it was, I mean, you had a one-child policy. Now, if you got a girl, that was not good. So the boys, they've been mummied by mummy and by grandparents from the day they were born. And they are spoiled rotten. Some of them are egoistic little assholes, and they are a pain in the ass. The girls have got no favors, been given no opportunities, and when they get into sports, man, they take that opportunity and they run with it. So Randy and I, we would pick 5 girls over 5 boys 10 days of the week.
Yeah.
They are super committed. They listen to everything you say because they've never been the center of attention and focus, and they are like a sponge. They are like a sponge that's been out on the Arizona Badlands for the last 10 years. I mean, there is no moisture in that sponge whatsoever. And they just soak it up, everything. And they work their ass off because they know that might be the only chance that they're ever going to get to do really well. And you got to realize, if you make the national team in China, you will have a pension for the rest of your life. And it's not a shit pension either. Now, you medal at the Asian Championship, bang, 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 you got more pension. You medal at the World Championships, bang, 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 bang. You medal at the Olympic Games, bang, bang, bang. You win an Olympic gold medal, you're set for life. I mean, we are talking a car, a fancy apartment, or 2 or 3 that you can rent out. I mean, you are financially, you're set for life. No problems. We don't have that system. I mean, in Australia, if you don't have endorsements and a manager and an agent and everything else, you know, you're done. There's nothing left.
Yeah, same thing in the States. Everyone for themselves.
Yeah. So girls, definitely, they are much easier to work with in China. Much easier. Also, because of the ethnicity of all the ethnic countries that are within China. For example, if you take far west, you've got the Mongolia.
Mm-hmm.
Now these are shepherds. These are nomads, and these guys that come from there, they're fantastic athletes. They're self-reliant. They haven't been mummied or daddied because they've been living in yurts, moving around with their cattle or with their, you know, whatever they were doing out in on the prairies. So they are very much different. And then you've got the people that come down from the region that are close to Cambodia. I mean, they're not Chinese either. I mean, they're something different. So you've got so many different nationalities within China, and that's why they have this diversity. I mean, you have the small gymnasts. They come from the small areas, or the areas of China where the population is very small. I mean, they're very small in stature. So you're sort of like Cambodians and Vietnam, those borders. That's where all the gymnasts come from. Then you've got these basketball players. Well, they're from the far north. And then you've got the weightlifters. They're sort of from the rural communities in the west. So you've got areas of China where they know that there is a certain talent that is specific for certain sports. And that's where they find them.
That's really interesting. So they have their own segregation within their own country. That's and that's where they pull from. That's really cool.
Yeah. But I don't think there's actually a plan for this. It's just
it's just how it is. Yeah.
It's just how it is.
Yeah, each region is homogenous because
exactly.
but the country is so big that it's a melting pot by default, but they don't mix.
Yeah. Exactly.
Rolf, you mentioned self-reliant as one of the important characteristics that coming from the sort of the Mongolian influence there. throughout all your years of working with all these different people from all these different sports, what would you say are the main characteristics of the people that actually, they don't just have the talent, but they actually have, you know, the sort of personality that can sort of drive them and help them overcome the challenges that they have to face to become, you know, very high performers? What would you say are those sort of main characteristics in your opinion?
I mean, without a doubt, you've got to have, I mean, if you don't have the right genetics, you're not going to be able to run super fast. I mean, that is, but then again, we know that, for example, if you look at Bolt and his career, if we take, for example, the world champs in 2015, now both Tyson Gay and Gatlin had run much better than him all year, and everybody was expecting him to get beaten. But the same one, both Tyson and Gatlin tied up. The reason they did that because he won the mental game in the call room. Certain athletes have the ability to focus on what they need to focus, and they know instinctively how to push the buttons of the guys that they're going to race against. Some athletes, I mean, we say that, you know, some athletes are smart and some aren't very smart. And I think that's, it all comes down to if you're a competitor. And that is something that I look for in athletes. Athletes who've got the ability to, as soon as you put them into the competition arena, it doesn't matter what shape they're in, they'll do things in competition that they haven't been anywhere near in training. If they just find the next gear and just another gear and another gear, they just seem to have one more gear. It doesn't matter what they do. They're the talents. They're the special talents. Now, if you can find the ones that have got that ability, that mental ability to be able to focus, and no matter what comes in their way, they will not lose track of why they're there and what they're doing. There's just no way. They'll go through a brick wall if you ask them. So they've got that ability to be able to focus. They don't let anything deter them. If there are setbacks, setbacks are just something that, I'm still standing, I can go. I can learn off this. They've always got an answer or a strategy. It's part of their DNA. They just go on. No matter what you throw at them, they'll find their way home no matter what. And if you find those mental characteristics and you couple that with some talent, then you've got a world beater. It's that simple. It sounds simple, but I've had a couple of athletes in my career as a coach that stick out, that just had so much ability, that mentally, I mean, they were just, oh God, I mean, it was just, appalling. They couldn't compete to save their lives. I mean, it didn't matter what we did, and that's why the reason, as I told you, Alex, that's why I went back to university and did a degree in behavioral science. I was trying to figure out how to get inside their head and find out why can't these people just, I mean, they're doing the sport, they're doing all this training, but once we get to competition, they just freeze. They just freeze. And I think, Mike, you were just saying a while back, and one of the major things is athletes, certain type of athletes, they just overcook it. I mean, they just, the typical is they'll come out in the warm-up and they just look fantastic. I mean, you just go, oh, yes. And then they sit down and warm-up's finished and they start calling up, okay, now we're starting. And all of a sudden, it's not the same athlete, because something in their head has told them, or what's happened is that they have this perception that, okay, I did that in warm-up and I threw fire, or I jumped fire, or whatever I did. It was easy. now I'm going to put the pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
And they choke. They think that they've got to do something new and they've got to add something to it instead of just letting the arousal of the competition give them that extra 2, 3, 4%, which we need for the comp. They just screw everything up by tightening up because they virtually, they just overcook everything. The whole thing is it's just gone. And I have a word for that in Swedish, and I call it winning the national warm-up champion. That's what I call those athletes.
Yep.
And I've had a couple of those that were just. I had a javelin thrower in Australia. Holy shit! This guy, he would just unload like 270, 280 feet in the warm-up, and then throw 240.
Yep.
And you just go, for the love of God, Wayne, what are you doing? And it just didn't matter. And I tried, and it just didn't matter what I did.
Yep. 4 p.m. players for 7 p.m. games.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I'm going to pinch that one off you. Yeah, no. So it's mental. The mental approach, and you're into this, Alex, with what you're doing now with your PhD and everything. I think that's one of the areas where, even though I have a degree, I still think myself as a total bloody clown when it comes to the mental part. And I just sort of wing it by experience. And I know the type of person I am. I like to build athletes' confidence and that they feel secure with me, they feel secure with the team, and they have a feel of security. And they know that with me, I'm not going to throw the water bottle at them if they have a bad meet. My son, he plays soccer, and he had a coach here in Sweden before he went to the UK. And he's a lovely guy, but he was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If the guy's lost, Patrick said, you knew that if you lost, he would walk into the change room and he'd stand to the right or to the left, straight inside the change room, because the first thing he would do, he would walk in and just swear and curse, and then he'd just throw his water bottle at, just straight into the changing room. If you were in the way, you'd get virtually knocked senseless by this water bottle coming flying at 100 miles an hour. So Patrick, he just knew that, hang a left, hang a right if we lost the game, and just chill, because coach is going to go mental for 10 minutes. Now, for me, if you think you're going to build, and this is a little bit how the Chinese coaches, the old generation works. It's intimidation and fear. It's a lot of stick and very little carrot. I like to build athletes' confidence and feeling and security. And this was something that I was criticised by the administrators in Dalian when I quit Dalian, and that was that I was too soft with the athletes, they thought.
How do you get around that language barrier? One of the ways that you build a rapport with someone is you can get their guard down because it's just the two of you. But if you have that interpreter there, there's always going to be that wall up. So how do you just get to know someone without the interpreter sitting there and almost diluting the relationship and ruining shit?
Well, I think probably that's one of my strengths as a coach. I'm very good at getting inside people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't perceive me as being dangerous. I don't have a threatening demeanor, I think, and I just try to win their confidence. Like Ocean, for example. Ocean spoke very, very bad English. Yet Ocean and I, in the 2 months that we were in Bern, we were like peas in a pod. We were sitting virtually every day conversing in the restaurant. But he spoke like dog, cat, house, hill. That was his English. Yet we spoke every day, all day. It was sign language, and you'd jump into positions and you'd watch his body language. And that's usually what I do even with Western athletes. I look at body language. What am I getting? Because the first thing that the telltale signs that they don't like you or they're not buying into your story. And I tell a lot of stories. And if they don't buy into the story, you'll pick it up very quickly with their body language, very quickly. And Chinese are no different. They like stories. They like sort of, you know, you sort of weave your little magic spell, and you've got a little plan there, you know. And they don't really understand what you're doing, and sometimes I don't either. But you get down there and you just sort of look at their body language, and then you'll say, okay, right, that didn't. Okay, so we'll back out of it, and we'll see. We'll push him a little bit over here, and look at that. All right, now, and you get a little bit of a, you know, a little signal over here saying that's going to work, and then you go with that, and then all of a sudden, like Ocean and I, we had, I mean, you know, we had a very, very close sort of knit relationship as athlete and coach, yet his English was virtually 10 words. We didn't need
Rolf, you said some gems there, and Mike, that's one thing. If you're in situations or you're with people that you can't rely on your language to talk to them, you can still build great relationships with people. Mm-hmm. Communication, verbal communication is only 25% of all communication. And I can say many times I've had great experiences with different people, and we haven't been able to actually talk really about anything, but you can just, there's a way you can deal with it, you know. And but you only get that knowledge when you put yourself into those experiences, because you can feel really weird about them at the beginning. Yeah. Like, how are we going to get on if we can't really talk? But you'd be amazed. Actually, you can have some of the best times of your life not knowing. You pointing at a cup, you know, and making fun with each other's languages, you know, and you can just enjoy the presence of other people without.
And I'm going to be. I'll say something now that it's controversial, I know, but my experience after being in the US quite a bit, and I've been to many universities and some of the biggest universities, and one thing that I find very, very difficult is that a lot of head coaches have got no idea. They've got no people skills whatsoever. Yeah. None. I've seen some shockers in, 1080, their headquarters is in Austin, Texas. I've been to University of Austin, what's it called in Austin, the big university?
Texas A&M or University of Texas in Austin? I have no idea, bro. I'm the wrong guy to ask. Texas Christian University. I got nothing for you.
Well, I'll backtrack. The number one sport in Texas is football.
Yeah.
So I've met a couple of the football coaches at Baylor and so forth, and honestly, you know, Jesus, if these guys weren't head coach of the football program or whatever, honestly, I'd hate to think what they would be doing.
Yeah, I've met some crazy coaches too in the hockey world. You know, like complete narcissists, just lunatics.
But there are coaches like that everywhere. Sure, but I think in the US there is this perception that if you're a head coach for university, you've got to sort of, you've got to be a suit and tie guy, and you've got to be very proper and very, it's above board and all of, hunky dory. And I don't know what I'm going to say, but it's just working with athletes, some of them have got no idea. It's just like, and then you've got these, assistant coaches who are running around and they're doing a fantastic job, and they're getting absolutely no accolades. They're getting nothing. And the head coach is getting everything. He's the man. He's delivering the goodies. But the people who are making the whole bloody program work are 4 or 5 assistant coaches. And that just, I'm going, what? But that's exactly how it works in China. The assistant coaches, the Chinese assistant coaches, most of them have got university degrees. The guy that Randy had before I came over, he was educated at Baylor. Very well educated, very nice guy, spoke very good English. Yet the head coach of the team where he was working, I think he was working with basketball. Look, in his eyes, Kevin, as his name was, he wasn't fit to even carry this guy's water bottle. And yet Kevin had an education which was far, far exceeded anything that this guy had even opened or even seen a book, let alone open the covers of it. And that, you know, that is something which is very strange in China. The guys who are the most educated have the least to say about sports in China.
Well, that's because they don't have the experience, so no one will listen to a word they fucking say. That's whether it's knowledge, experience, whatever you quantify, but that's the reason why that head coach is in the position he's in. He's paid his dues, and he's gone up through the ranks and done it the proper way in their eyes. So he's got the resume, and that's all that matters.
In the US, he's done his thing through the sports. Mm-hmm. In China, they've done exactly the same thing, but it's only on one thing that they've done that trip on, and that's political career. So they've been members of the local Communist Party for the last 15, 20, 25 or 30 years. Now, the head coach of Dalian, who I had a huge conflict with, because the reason they brought me to Dalian, because he had no success for 5 years. For 5 years, his whole team had just gone backwards. So they brought me in, and in 7 months, I turned these guys around, and they were PBing. And then he walked in and told the boss, "Look, I'm number 3 in the Communist Party in Dalian, blah blah blah. Now you're going to have to fire this bloody, or you're going to have to tell this bloody foreign coach to sit down and shut up." Mm-hmm. And then he started coaching them again, and they went from being number 2, 3, 4, 5 in China to going number 4, 5, 9, 10 in the preceding 6 months. After you were gone? Well, yeah. Well, the last 6 months I was there, I wasn't coaching them. Yeah. I had one athlete that I coached then, and she was the number 1 women's high jumper in China. And even though she was the number 1 in China, she won the national games, which is their Olympics that they have at home, which is huge. It is massively big because it's propaganda. It's called the National Games. She won the National Games. She won the Chinese indoor, Chinese outdoor, the Chinese Grand Prix. She won everything. And when we were going towards the Asian Championships, the head coach walked in, or the head of the Olympic Sports Center, Mr. Sun, walked in and said, "I'm handing the athlete back to her coach." And I said, "Why?" "Oh, she needs to get back to the Chinese things, the cultural things, because now we're going to the Asian Championships." Why bring in the foreigner if you don't want to take his fucking advice, right? Exactly what I said. And I slammed the door and went up and packed my bags and went home. I went, and then I'd already got an offer from Randy to join him in Beijing. So, and they didn't know that, of course. But I mean, you know, you work for like, you know, a year, and everything is you're just winning everything, and you're number 1 in China, and they're not happy. I mean, what do you do? But again, I've learned in these years that I've been in China, I've learned so much about coaching under very, very difficult circumstances. I've had to remaster a lot of things that I took for granted, things that I normally wouldn't have to think about. I had to think a great deal about in China. And sometimes I think when I'm sitting here, you know, now we had this social distancing and everything, I'm sitting here by myself some days, my wife's at work, and I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, but where am I going to use this knowledge that I got in China? And I'm trying to think, well, you know, I might end up in some place which is remotely sort of similar to China, then I can use this again. But if I go to the US or somewhere else to coach, or Italy or whatever, you know, then I'm screwed. But yeah, no, it's no. You've got to look at it from that vantage point. I mean, the day you stop learning, that then you should get out of the game. I'm a firm believer that we learn every day. We learn something new, and we should try to learn it something. I have a thing that I started probably 20 years ago, and that is I read one scientific or one study every day. Every day. It doesn't matter where I am. Every day, either as soon as I wake up or before I go to bed, I read a scientific journal or an article about something to do with what I do. So, I mean, that means that I've read over the last 20 years, just multiply 365 by 20. So I've read, 7,500 or whatever plus articles about training and, and strength and conditioning and so forth. So I'm always learning something. I mean, at the moment, I've started a discussion with a guy in New Zealand who's a sports scientist, and Randy and I believe that during the later parts of the leg swinging through in the sprint stride, there is no lengthening of the hamstring. It's isometric. And now there's just come out a study from England, from the English Sports Institute, where they totally rebunk that and say it's bullshit. There is no position at any stage where the muscles are working isometrically in a sprint. But I would say that there's definitely one, and that is in the stance position when you hit the ground for a short period of time before your center of gravity moves forward over that leg. There is no movement whatsoever in the hamstring. It is isometric, full stop. But we've been looking at a few things, Randy and I, that with Muscle Lab and the quantum system and measuring systems, and there's no way that the muscle in the hamstring is working with the strength shortening cycle throughout its full cycle. It is isometric in the last part, and that's something that Randy calls DIS. Dynamic isometric strength. It's the last couple of degrees before you stop in the eccentric phase and start going back concentrically. That little window there, and that's what I've been doing a lot of my. That's why the 1080 system is today on the market, is because I wanted the engineers to build a system where I could load the eccentric phase heavy or light, but at various speeds, extremely high velocities, and unload at high velocities. And that way see what I could do with the eccentric phase, because we knew from experiments with very heavy loading eccentrically, we could build big amounts of strength, but power is a whole different ball game. And then you've got the next problem is rate of force development and rate of power development on top of that. So I needed a system where I could load very high and unload very quick to be able to work the stretch shortening cycle very, very quickly. So it needed to be able to do that in less than 100 milliseconds, because anything that takes longer than 100 milliseconds at the end of the movement phase and the eccentric phase, that'll dissipate as heat. So all the elasticity that you've built up, if you stay down there, let's say for 450 milliseconds, then a lot of the elastic energy that you had in that position, you've lost as heat dispersion. So the maximum amount of time, or the optimum amount of time actually to utilize all the elastic components or the elastic energy is less than 100 milliseconds. So anything that you're getting into the eccentric phase and out of it in less than 100 milliseconds, then you can utilize the full potential of the fascia and the tendon and its elasticity. So Randy and I have worked a great deal with that. And in that, I've actually come up with an index that I call the EA index, which is Elastic Acceleration Index. And the algorithm is that you take peak velocity and divide it by time to peak velocity, and you'll get a number. And we've done thousands of muscle lab tests where we have those two metrics. And now we've gone back and pulled all these data out, and we've looked at this. And every time we have athletes who are the big gifted athletes who can do the big rebounds, they're the guys who can push the big power numbers. What they absolutely excel in is that very, very short segment, what Randy calls the DIS. They have the ability to be able to de-accelerate and then re-accelerate from eccentric to concentric better than anybody else.
Yeah, reactive elastic.
Yeah, and I mean the normal thing we do that we look at that is that you do a squat jump and a counter movement jump. Now, normally, for example, in SHL, the Swedish Hockey League, you'll get guys who will jump, let's say, 60 centimeters in a squat jump. That's good. And then you get them to do a CMG, and they jump 57 centimeters. So they cannot utilize one single iota of elastic energy. Nothing. They actually jump worse. And when we then try to figure out, and at first we thought, oh, we need to do more plyometrics. It didn't help. It sometimes it got up to plus minus zero, but it didn't make any major difference. But when I started testing them with different weights, eccentrically and at different speeds, that's where I found the big differential. And that is that these guys who have the big differences between a squat jump and a CMG, and that's plus 7, 8, 10 centimeters difference, they are superior in the eccentric phase. They are loads better in the eccentric phase.
Makes a lot of sense, mate. And I mean, we would love to go over this. I mean, you said that before you was working with this guy in New Zealand now that's interested in sort of going more in depth with this, right?
Yeah, well, John, you know who it is, John Cronin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So John, what he wants to, I'm going to translate from Swedish all the tests that we've done and all the data. And I've got about 5 or 6 studies that I'm going to send John with all the data that we've looked at the EA index and time to peak velocity metric. And the problem with it, I've told you this before, that if you look at GymAware and a lot of other systems out there today, they give a lot of metrics, which is great, but they're all missing one metric, and that is the time to peak velocity. Now, the time to peak velocity is a rate of force development or a rate of power development metric. But what is interesting with time to peak velocity is that the most difficult thing for the human body to do is to accelerate a light object. So if I have a standardized test that I can do as soon as they've done a warm-up, and I can see the condition of their central nervous system, what is the fatigue state and readiness state of their central nervous system with one very, very short, easy test, I can do that because I've got a metric called TPV. And the first quality that drops as soon as an athlete starts getting fatigue is the time to peak velocity. And John has been working a little bit differently. He's been working at rate of power development, RPD. And he's seen the same thing, because the problem with a lot of people, what they're doing today is, and this is, I mean, Randy worked for Kaiser, and I know Dennis very well. And we've been bugging Dennis that he's got to get a couple of metrics into the system, because it is so easy to get carried away with Kaiser. Now, I love Kaiser. I think it's a great system. It has a very, very specific place in the process of building powerful athletes and fast athletes. We can talk about that another day. But what is missing with Kaiser and a lot of other systems, they'll give you a watt. Now, the problem with that watt is that, okay, so I did 2,000 watts, and then I do an intervention of 6 weeks. Now I'm doing 2,400. Oh, great. And everybody's jumping around and everybody's getting paid and everybody's happy. And, you know, he's doing 2,400 watt. But have I actually improved what I need to improve? Because what is most important is the time frame.
Yeah, how long did it take him to get it?
Exactly. And a lot of cases, we're getting guys who are pushing bigger numbers, but they've actually flattened the curve out. Yep. So the curve is not steep anymore. It's actually quite, it's the incline. So what we want to do, we want to get that curve going. And if we can now produce 2,000 watts, we're producing the same amount of watt, and people go, oh, you managed to do nothing with him. Yeah, but hang on, see, have a look at this. When he started, he was doing 2,000 watts, and his TPV, his time to peak velocity, was 0.23. Now he's doing 2,040 watts, virtually no difference, but his TPV is 0.18.
What are you using to measure this?
Muscle Lab.
Muscle Lab.
But there is a new system, an American system that Randy and I are working with. I'm going to plug for this. It's going to have everything. At the moment, one of my favorite systems. Now, Muscle Lab is a big bulk of a thing. It's stupid. You've got to have all sorts of shit because it's firstly done for researchers. But I've got a system which is 15 years old, and the new software is shit. The old software is brilliant, so I'm not going to change it. There's another system which I've got in front of me here. I've told Alex about it. It's called VMAX Pro from Germany. And it has bar tracking, and it has a lot of very neat things. And I've been trying to tell these Germans that stick in TPV there, but they won't listen, so I bugger them. But there's a guy called Scott Damon. Now, Scott is the father of Bar Sensei.
Yeah.
Now, he is coming out with a new Bar Sensei, which is going to have bar tracking. It's going to have 500 hertz resolution, which is better than this. And it's going to have TPV. Plus, we're going to have built-in EA index. So the algorithm is there. All you got to do is just press the button and it'll tell you exactly what's happening with the EA index. And the EA index will actually tell you what is the state. Am I getting more explosive and more elastic? Because if those numbers are going the wrong way, I'm getting stronger, but I'm not getting stronger for sprinting or jumping. I'm getting stronger for something else.
When does this new model come out for Bar Sensei? Because I'll just buy it right now.
I would think maybe August, September.
Okay.
Scott's working his ass off at the moment with all the algorithms and the thing is, it's going to cost less than $500.
Yeah, it says $375 right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be in that price range still. Now, my Muscle Lab, I bought that in 2005, and it cost. What did it cost? Let's see. I've got to convert this. $15,000.
Yeah.
But okay, I've got EMG. I've got a force plate by 3 by 3 feet. I've got infrared sensors that I can measure ground contact times. So it's a complete bloody lab. But I've got it.
How big is that thing?
The encoder's about sort of like size of half a brick. But you've got to have all the other bits and pieces with you. So you've got
a suitcase.
I've got it's actually it's somewhere. Yeah, hang on, there it is. So I've got a suitcase that is like that big.
Oh, that's not too bad.
So it's about the size that you for what do you call it? Overhead compartment on your flight. But the problem is, if you want to go flying around the world and you open this thing up at security.
Nowadays, that's a problem.
Oh, man. I mean, they go bonkers. I mean, I've missed several flights because I've been called. They said, "No, we want to X-ray this," you know, and they want to tear it apart because I mean, you've got. Let's see, what do we got in here? You've got the encoder. It's like a big brick with a string coming out of it, and it's pretty heavy. What's that? So they've got to go. You know.
I'm looking at this right now. I'm trying to see the cost of It's at ergotest.com. I'm trying to see how much everything costs. It's just like contact us. I guess it's too much to list.
Rolf, mate, I need to wrap this up. What a pleasure.
No worries.
What a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, mate. And I'm really happy to connect you two great dudes together. And we're going to have to get you back on there another time too.
It's always
hopefully
fun.
Many
it's
other
always
times.
fun to talk to people who are in the industry. And once again, and you know that I very, very much appreciate talking to you, Alex. It's always uplifting, and I can't wait till you're finished with your PhD. I'm going to pick your brain like, oh, well, Jesus.
It's a big pleasure on my end, mate. You've been massively influential in my life, so thank you.
I'm going to be your first customer.
Sounds good.
I'm just going to lie back in your Freudian chair there and just say, right, okay, why am I such a mental case?
Well, I'm not a magician, so I don't know if I can help you there, mate.
Oh, no, my wife's been trying for 35 years. She's given up.
Listen, Rolf, thank you so much, mate. And Mike, great podcast. Cheers, buddy.
Right on, guys.
And okay. Catch you all soon. Cheers, Rolf.
Cheers.
Thanks, Rolf.
Thank you.